from one of the best investigative journalists out there at We The Inevitable. Please follow him on Twitter at We The Inevitable. Is coming at us with a game theory chess, right? This is the thread. What could come before 1/2021 Inauguration Day? The emphasis on theory, so just pay attention and use discernment. As we can see here, coming at us from 17 and the post, number 60. You can count the people who have the full picture on two hands. He's talking about the operators that are on the Q team. Of those, less than 10 people, only 3 are non-military. So we know that 7 of the people that are within 17 are military officials, probably generals who have the scope of everything, right? And are absolutely playing 5D chess with the enemy. Now, why is this relevant? The game theory is this. Outside of a potential operator who has been dialed in with orders specific to his or her mission, so there's male and female, nobody else has this information. Operators would never divulge. Alice in Wonderland, down the rabbit hole obviously. Game theory equals chess moves and counter moves. Moving forward. This article describes pretty clearly all of the remaining moves based on the things that should occur should there be a disputed election, written in September of 2019. Over a year ago, guys, and this was their plan. This is scary accurate so far. And guys, this just dropped minutes ago. To summarize the 54-page article, the path that this will take will start with lawsuits and counter lawsuits in the lower state courts, up to the higher state courts, up until December 8th, a hard date, only 5 days away, when by constitutional law the electorates must be selected. Right. There will likely be 2 sets in these contested states. One by the state legislators and one by the state seal of certificate through the governorship. On 12/14, another hard date, the electorates from each state will vote, and the contested states with 2 groups of electorates will oppose each other, whether it's a Republican state legislature and a Democratic governor or vice versa. Now, this leads us to not being able to determine which are valid in the House and Senate because a standard can't be met for all states on which electorate votes to certify in Congress, as the 2 chambers in Congress will also oppose each other. The control who decides then resides in the president of the Senate, which is Mike Pence. Mike Pence, Senate, will then duke it out with Nancy Pelosi, the House of Representatives, in a posturing battle over the 12th Amendment, the 20th Amendment, the Electoral Count Act of 1887, and the 3 U.S.C. 15. Lawsuits will be filed pre and post 1/6/21, another hard date. Congressional certification of the votes, but will turn up nothing, as inevitably lower courts will be powerless to tell Congress what to do. And the Supreme Court likely won't get involved or be seen as being political in nature based on PTSD of a similar experience, Bush versus Gore. This will continue on until 1/20, another hard date, when it will be determined that Mike Pence is no longer Senate President and has a conflict of interest in deciding anything, with Nancy Pelosi being elected House Speaker again on 1/3/21. She will attempt to declare herself as acting president for as long as the stalemate remains, by virtue of the 20th Amendment, and plan an inauguration. Trump will simultaneously be doing the same, and undoubtedly the whole world, both sides, will be watching in fear of what will happen on 1/20. Pelosi further declares that once it is noon on January 20th, with Pence no longer president of the Senate, it will fall to the president pro tempore, Senator Chuck Grassley, to declare his willingness to accept Biden as president-elect in order for her to end her service as acting president. Trust Grassley, C-17 Post 2274. As of 1 p.m. on 1/20/21, the U.S. military will be the last option on whom they chose to follow orders from, acting President Nancy Pelosi or assumed re-elected President Donald J. Trump. This cannot go further because one of these, in quote, presidents must have control over the nuclear codes. and button otherwise face severe national security threats, with no commanding officer to respond to enemies' hostile and/or nuclear threats. I would like to point out that Donald J. Trump ensured that Nancy Pelosi became Speaker of the House by saying, and quote, "I'll get you all the Republican votes you need, always 17 steps ahead." At this point, the world has had a fast-tracked education on the Constitution and what is legal/illegal constitutionally. Along the way, there will be undoubtedly civil unrest and riots. What have I been saying for months now, guys? I knew this was coming. Occurring as the people become increasingly unsettled by the lack of finality in the 2020 election and the undulous emotional swings as people talk, postulate, and opine about what each of the lawsuits and ensuing positions the Senate, the House of Representatives, the governors, the state Supreme Courts, and potentially the U.S. Supreme Court mean or indicate. Unfortunately, they all have countermoves, and thus the pendulum of uneasiness will swing far in both directions multiple times. The media will work everyone up into a frenzy this entire time, as well futilely in incorrectly declaring each of these moves to be the final nail that decides it all. Where this article also misses is that patriots will continue to drop increasingly damning evidence in courts. Transparency is the only way it is mentioned by 17 numerous times, including the 17 posts, as you can read all those numbers, and I suggest that you read those. This will amount pressure on the Dems and make it increasingly hard to take the path stated in the document in the public's eyes. But nonetheless, and remember, this document was written in September of 2019. Absolutely mind-blowing. Continuing. The Dems will make it increasingly hard to take the path stated in the document in the public's eyes. But nonetheless, they will be in their constitutional right to do so, as long as the courts refuse to intervene on the issues legally or correctly. This will point out extensive judiciary fraud to all the people who still fail to see it. If the public pressure is enough and the transparency is enough, it could force Biden to concede, which we've read many a time. For about the past week, we've been talking about Biden conceding. But if he doesn't, then it will continue along the path stated in the document unless military steps in prior to 120, the Military Insurrection Act, right? Which is why the other thing that 17 says is the only way. The military, as stated in 17 posts 26 and 36. What will be necessary for Trump to use the military will be the civil unrest and rioting, an attempted overthrow of a sitting president, and he will use the Insurrection Act to activate them. 17 post 34. On POTUS's order, a state of temporary military control will be actioned and special operations will be carried out. This essentially summarizes the entire game of chess that could be played out, and with Trump wanting to completely exposing the flawed process and to also maintain the integrity of the Constitution, aka law and order, and to also, in quote, bring us to the very precipice, while still maintaining full control of the outcome. This will likely play into the most thorough and exhaustive way the game theory, covering every aspect of constitutional fraud and manipulation, where in the end, the only option left, granted to Trump in the Constitution, will be to use the military to save the republic, as seen in post 22 and also post 24. I will point out that at any point during this time period, Trump could use the Insurrection Act, as there already exists and surely will be more evidence to support it constitutionally. Since Congress has already approved and the states have already activated the National Guard, we've already seen that. POTUS can take control of them. This would allow the Marines and the National Guard to work together under one set of orders. This is shown in the Passe Commodious Act, whereby the President of the United States can take control. I hope I pronounced those words earlier correctly. Temporary martial law could come into play, and the happenings could occur. Lastly, and very importantly, a nice coincidence for you, with 1/20/21 being a very important day for the national security, There is only one 17 post on 120, and it is post 3777, the digits. This video was posted on 1/20/2018 of the military. You decide, and that video is this, my friends. Eisenhower warning us of the military-industrial complex. I believe that all this is going to go down. We will have to wait and see, but I've been telling you for a very long time, guys, that riots will come, rolling blackouts will happen, and we need to be prepared. Please know that if anything happens, that patriots are in control.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. We now stand 10 years past the midpoint of a century that has witnessed 4 major wars among great nations. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.